Turkey takes Israel's blockade of Gaza to the International Court of Justice and rejects a UN report that says the Gaza siege is legal. So what is Turkey likely to gain from a legal battle? Is Ankara now on a collision course with Tel Aviv? And will this set a precedent for other countries in dealing with Israel? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Felicity Barr. So the row between Ankara and Tel Aviv over the Gaza flotilla has escalated, with Turkey announcing it will challenge Israel's blockade on Gaza at the International Court of Justice. The Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said Turkey did not accept the findings of the recent UN report, which said Israel's blockade of Gaza was a legal security measure. Turkey has already expelled the Israeli ambassador and severed its military ties with Tel Aviv after Israel refused to apologise for the killing of 9 Turks during a raid on the Gaza-bound aid flotilla. All right, let's now introduce our panel of guests for the programme. Joining us from Istanbul is Mustafa Akyol. He is author of the recently released book Islam Without Extremes, A Muslim Case for Liberty. In Tel Aviv, we have Greg Roman, Deputy Director of the Global Research and International Affairs Centre, and himself a former official at the Israeli Ministry of Defence. And in Cairo for us is Abdullah Al-Ashal, a professor of international law at the American University in Cairo. He was formerly the assistant to Amr Moussa when he was the Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for being with us. We're looking forward to a lively debate with you. But first, let's hear from the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu. Speaking on state television, he said the UN report on the flotilla raid had not been endorsed by the UN and was therefore not binding.
What is binding is the International Court of Justice. This is what we are saying. Let the International Court of Justice decide.
All right, well, let's begin with our guest, Greg Roman, joining us from Tel Aviv. Greg Roman, why doesn't Israel simply apologise for the deaths on the Mavi Marmara? It would take the heat out of the situation, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not just that Israel is not willing to apologize, but an apology would be an admission of guilt on behalf of the Israeli soldiers who partook in the raid itself. Israel is willing to compensate those individuals who were unfortunately killed in the attack, and it is also willing to express regret. However, what must be seen is that these individuals went on their own accord to break, as the Palmer report reported, was a legal blockade of Gaza to prevent weapons from going in, which eventually will be used against Israeli civilians. An apology would say that this policy is wrong, and we should not have to apologize for defending ourselves.
But I have to say, the Defence Minister Ehud Barak has indicated that he would quite like to say sorry. The Americans would certainly appreciate an apology, wouldn't they?
Unfortunately, this isn't just what the defense minister or the Americans want. We have to understand that there were 6 ships who were part of this flotilla, and only 1 was violent. You don't see complaints coming from the other 5 ships, which, with remarkable civil disobedience, no violence happened there. So it leads me to question the motivations of the IHH and the Turks who were on that ship.
Mustafa Akyol joining us from Istanbul. How serious do you think Turkey really is about going to the International Court of Justice? The UN report said the Gaza blockade by Israel is legal.
Well, Turkey is serious about that because from the beginning, both the Turkish government and the Turkish society, the overwhelming majority of the Turkish society, did not recognize the legitimacy of the blockade, which is, as we see, is a collective punishment on the Palestinian people for the actions of some. And the people on Mavi Marmara, who were not just Turks and Muslims, but also included some Jewish peaceniks, they went there to defy the blockade. And in Turkey, it's seen as a humanitarian act, which was supported by, again, the overwhelming majority of the society. And for the Turks, it's simply unacceptable that Israeli commandos board a Turkish ship, occupy a Turkish ship, and kill 9 civilians on the board, and just do not even bother to apologize. This is the first act that since World War I, this is the first time that a Turkish ship has been attacked in international waters. And I think Turkey is giving the message that while Israel can get away with several things it does in the international scene by some of its actions which are against international law, but it cannot get away with us, and we will care for our citizens and we will go after their case. And I think there's no way that Turkey would back off from a demand for an apology. And I think it's just not a matter of apology for political pressure. I think we Turks expect a more reasonable attitude from the Israelis, just some care for innocent lives. 9 people were dead, shot from close range several times on that ship. And I think it is, if you're friends, and we see the Israeli people as friends, but I think friends, when they make mistakes, they apologize. And I think it's the expectation of not just the Turkish government, but like the majority of the Turkish society as well.
I know Greg Roman wants to come back in on that. I'm going to go to him in a moment because I just want to put it to Abdullah Al-Ashal. Legally, talk us through this, Abdullah. How would Turkey go about taking this case to the International Court of Justice? Is it possible to do?
Yes, I think Turkey, when you follow the declarations and the statements of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, you may get the impression that he is not going as a case against Israel by Turkey. Because in this case, if Turkey forwarded this case before the court, this means that the court has to decide first whether it is admissible and it is competent or not. And I'm afraid that the reservations of Israel to the competence of the International Court of Justice may make some troubles for the court to decide surely that it is competent to decide. So in this case, I think that that Turkey would examine very thoroughly whether it could be a case by Turkey. But preferably, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said that this is a case between the international community and Israel. This means, and impliedly, that Turkey is going to the General Assembly to ask the General Assembly to submit a demand to the International Court of Justice to get an advisory opinion from the court. And I think Israel doesn't respect any decisions and any resolutions taken by the United Nations since the creation of Israel. We may remind our spectators that one day in the 9th of July, on the 9th of July 2004, the International Court of Justice decided that the separation wall or the security wall, according to the term of Israel, is in fact illegal because it had been built on occupied territories, which Israel doesn't recognize as being occupied. And at the same time, the court had rejected all the defenses of Israel, including the one concerning the self-defense and the security, and also the military necessities. This is why I think Turkey is going to take the case to the International Court of Justice through the General Assembly, and this is very easy for Turkey. At the same time, concerning the implementation of the advisory opinion, I think Turkey would be behind it. This is different from the separation wall case, which is left in the open, right, and even the United Nations had ignored it.
Greg Roman, I mean, Abdullah Al-Ashal makes an important point, doesn't he, that how is Israel going to respond if Turkey does go ahead with legal action? In the past, Israel tends to ignore these sort of rulings anyway, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, the ICJ resolution on the separation fence is not anything to do with any resolution which may come forward from an advisory opinion from the ICJ. The only way Turkey could bring this matter to the ICJ is by having Israel's acquiescence and agreeing to this case, or by going to the General Assembly. However, I find it ironic that when the United Nations investigated the IHH and the Mavi Marmara incident, that the Turks said specifically that they have nothing to do with the ship. And now all of a sudden they want to handle responsibility for this and go to an international court. So on one hand, they say that they have nothing to do with the incident prior to the release of the Palmer report. And on the other hand, they say they now want to bring this issue to the ICJ. It's hypocritical. And essentially what they're trying to do is nitpick international reports, where on one hand they agree with the Goldstone report, and now they disagree with the Palmer reports. They only pick what is good for what they consider this non-foreign policy of Erdogan and Davutoglu. We have to understand that the way the Turks are moving forward is based on their interests and not based on any form of international law, which this doesn't have anything to do with. It's a bilateral issue between Turkey and Israel, which must be solved bilaterally.
Well, let's put this point to Mustafa Akyol then. Mustafa Akyol, Turkey's simply doing this for domestic reasons. It looks good to a domestic audience. That's what Greg Roman is essentially saying.
Well, every government cares about domestic audience. The Israeli government obviously cares about domestic audience too. But just moving on, I should say that it's really moving to hear a reference to the Goldstone report from an Israeli speaker. Great, you know, I agree with the Goldstone report in the sense that it accused Israel for committing war crimes in Gaza, and that's actually how really Turkey sees the Gaza situation. War crimes committed on both sides, not just on the Hamas side, but on the Israeli side. Turkey cares for Gaza, and it is just not.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure on the author to continue. We'll go back to Greg in a moment.
Okay, well, the thing is, Turkey will use all its power in the international setting to stand for this case, for both on the attack on the Mavi Marmara, on the killings of 9 civilians, and also for the blockade on Gaza, which Turkey does not recognize as legitimate. And it's not the UN that recognizes the blockade on Gaza as legitimate. This report is not a UN report, as in the same sense that it was the Goldstone report was. In the past few days, I mean, Turkish spokesmen, including the Turkish diplomat who joined this report, said that they found it biased in favor of some of the Israeli concerns. And I think the report was biased, in my point of view, in order to find a compromise solution between Turkey's stance and the Israeli stance. And that's why I think the report emphasized, in a very similar language to the Israeli language, that the blockade on Gaza is legitimate. That's not something that Turkey recognizes, so Turkey will push for that, and Turkey will push for the illegitimacy of the blockade on Gaza, and also for it will keep demanding an apology from the Israeli government for the 9 civilians, including an American citizen, which was killed on Mavi Marmara.
Greg Roman?
Well, I think that the former speaker's logic is fallacious. On one hand, he talks about supposed Israeli war crimes, but on the other, he forgets about Turkish action against Kurds and against their other neighbors. For instance, they tried to sign a defense pact with Syria only 18 months ago, and now we see Syrians killing 2,000 of their own citizens. Where's the international condemnation against them? Why is Turkey not trying to take the same kind of action in international forums against their Syrian neighbor?
What they're trying to use Israel as is a foil for internal domestic dissent. Turkey has been quite forceful in condemning the crackdown on Syria in the past couple of months.
Exactly. Can I respond to that? Turkey has been condemning Syrian violence against its own people. Well, we probably go. They haven't killed our citizens yet. Well, but we care for the Syrian people as well. And Turkey, although it had good relations with Syria until recently, it was a policy which was before the Arab Spring. Turkey has been criticizing the Syrian brutality, the Syrian government's brutality on its own people. As for the Kurds, Turkey has a nasty history with the Kurds, but this very government in Turkey has changed that policy and made many improvements on human rights issues. Kurdish is not banned in Turkey as it was in the 90s. And interestingly, it was the Turkish generals, which some Israelis love a lot.
Do you know what, gentlemen? We're going to stop just there because I want to bring back in Abdullah Al-Ashul, who's waiting there patiently for us in Cairo. One Egyptian newspaper, Abdullah, had the headline, "A lesson that Turkey has taught Egypt," pointing out that Egypt, of course, has shown no sign of wanting to take legal action on behalf of the families of those Egyptian policemen who were killed on the Sinai border. Do you think Turkey's actions at the moment is putting pressure on Egypt?
I think the military council had decided to cool down everything with Israel, and this is encouraging Israel also to overstepping the dignity of Egypt. The people in Egypt are very furious about this stand, and they are more furious after the Turkish stand, because we know Israel, in fact, is aggressing everything. Israel had launched a complete attack against the Egyptian territories, and they killed policemen, official military. So the military council, in fact, asked for apology. And they in Egypt said in an official statement by the government that Israel had apologized. By the second day, the Minister of Defense in Israel said that it is not apology at all. This is a kind of sorrow for what happened.
So why hasn't Egypt pushed it then, Abdullah? Why hasn't Egypt pushed the issue, demanded an apology, a real apology, and also said, you know, we want compensation on behalf of those who died?